It is a common exercise in cultural debates to ask an audience for a simple show of hands. Do we currently live in a patriarchy? The crowd votes yes or no, and the tally is recorded as a fact about the society itself. But a binary instrument cannot measure a graded phenomenon. You can take a yes or no vote on whether a bill passed, but applying that same switch to a sprawling societal structure fractures the inquiry. When people disagree on the final verdict, they rarely disagree on the underlying facts. Instead, they are selecting entirely different registers of society, formal law versus local advantage, and compressing them under a single word. Philosophers call this the Sorites problem. Remove one grain of sand from a heap, and it remains a heap. Continue removing grains, and at no identifiable point does the category vanish. The boundary is a fiction. Evaluative vocabulary operates on the same logic. Remove one male CEO, strike down one unequal statute, hire one woman with a doctorate, and the societal structure does not cross a neat threshold into non-existence. The lack of a sharp boundary does not mean the phenomenon is an illusion. Heaps of sand exist. The error lies in treating a complex gradient as something you are either entirely inside or entirely outside. Demanding a definitive yes or no on a continuous gradient forces the audience to deliver a moral indictment rather than an accurate structural measurement. We see the symptoms of this poor measurement in smaller arguments. Take the claim that because roughly equal numbers of men and women report feeling discriminated against in surveys, structural fairness has been achieved. This scatterplot shows the flaw in that logic. A shared survey checkbox compresses different realities. A career quietly foreclosed over 2 decades and an unwelcome remark at dinner both register as identical points. Equal incidence of complaint does not prove symmetry of condition. To understand the actual condition, we have to separate the head count of individuals from the distribution of institutional authority. Apartheid functioned as a system of extreme minority rule. The governed majority was never the governing one. The system relied on a rigid racial classification, acting as the gate for citizenship and ownership, rendering a raw demographic headcount useless for mapping power. Monarchy operates on the same logic. Absolute sovereign power is held by a single family over millions. Power resides in what the position authorizes, not in the numerical size of the group holding it. Cultural theorists like bell hooks observe that a systemic arrangement is frequently taught, enforced, and rewarded by mixed gender operators. The people maintaining the hierarchy are rarely entirely male. But pointing out that the enforcers are mixed is a separate argument from claiming the resulting power gradient is flat. Who enacts the negatives is a different issue from the direction the authority tilts. Equating numerical incidence with power allocation allows observers to claim systemic symmetry by focusing on the roster of operators while ignoring the underlying architecture of authority. In linguistic terms, patriarchy functions as a pejorative contestable. It is a word whose primary grammatical job is not to serve as a neutral descriptor, but to issue an accusation. The syntax of the word assigns the culprit before the argument begins. It takes a specific gendered subject and the predicate of rule and welds them together into a single noun. This structure forces a cognitive error known as authoring displacement. First, a complex pattern of unequal societal action is compressed into a single noun. We discretize the web of human behavior to make it manageable. Then, that newly formed noun is inverted, treated as the upstream cause that actively dictates society's behavior. We rarely do this with positive civilizational achievements. We treat those as ambient progress or the rule of law. Blame requires an author on whom it can land. Credit is allowed to dissolve into the universal. Judith Butler argued there is no inner doer behind the deed. The behavior constitutes the identity. Applying this deflationary cut to the system itself reveals that the structure is the result, not the prior author. When we fail to do this, we encounter a misbilling problem. Because the system's operators are now mixed gender, the word structurally misaddresses its invoice to a male author for an architecture laid down by historical designers. The word's very syntax forces a flawed analytical premise. It demands a single gendered culprit for a distributed systemic architecture. It is common to hear that structural disparities are baked into the culture like flour in a cake. But baked flour is irreversible chemistry. but the reaction does not run backwards. Social constraints are not finished products. They are maintained processes, enduring only through continuous, active enforcement, sentence by sentence. The accurate physical model is hysteresis, momentum that persists after the original cause is removed. This chart maps systemic constraint over time to illustrate how hysteresis operates. Momentum persists, but decays if maintaining conditions withdraw. Formal constraints have the fastest decay rate. Repeal a statute, and that specific boundary lifts comparatively quickly. Institutional defaults operate on a medium decay rate. Architectures built around a single earner household lag by roughly a generation before settling out. Affective and grammatical coding carries the longest half-life. Vocabulary and habit decay much slower than law. Mapping these different half-lives reveals a critical distinction. We are not looking at a finished product, but a maintained process, one that requires continuous fuel to prevent its inevitable decay. Substituting patriarchy with another system noun, like androcentrism or gender hierarchy, does not solve the analytical problem. Any gendered system noun performs the same conceptual compression and authoring displacement as the original word. You are simply relocating the error. The practical solution is to retire the binary referendum. We transition from taking a census of names to mapping a topology of mechanics. This radar chart maps active societal constraints across multiple axes. Instead of asking for a verdict, we identify precisely which mechanisms remain active and in which specific domains. We measure the intensity of the consequence, and we calculate the exact reversibility timescale of the constraint. The economist Amartya Sen notes that observing these structures from a specific vantage point is a positional observation. It is a stance, but the location of the observer does not invalidate the evidence of the mechanism. To dismiss an analysis solely based on the author's gender is to fall for authoring displacement in reverse. It lets the noun carry the weight of the evidence. Analytical rigor requires us to stop issuing civilizational invoices to abstract nouns. We must start mapping the precise active mechanisms of power.